Malcolm Hendry is on the executive of the Aged Care Association of New Zealand. He's also in charge of Birchley Residential Care and Chatsford Retirement Village in Dunedin. And he joins us now to talk about his missive and the missive of the Aged Care Association to the new government. And like all, it is a plea for more involvement, more funding, and suggesting that if there isn't, the aged care system is going to come to a collapse. Joining us now, Malcolm Hendry. Malcolm, welcome to the show. Good to hear from you this morning.
Yeah, good morning, Michael.
I've read your piece, and this was the suggestion from the Aged Care Association and the briefing to the incoming government, that basically our system is creaking at the parts. Half of you aren't making any money, and that home care is becoming less available to those who want to stay in their own homes who are aged. There's a lack of beds out there, and really nothing's going to get any better anytime soon. Would it be fair to say you've got a system in crisis at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And we've been saying that for many years now, because we've seen the bulge in the population coming from the baby boomers and the pressure that was going to put on the health system generally and aged care in particular. So we knew this was coming, and we've been warning for many years that something needed to be done, but nothing's happened.
All around the country, I see retirement villages springing up. I see dementia wards being built. I see home facilities being constructed. It doesn't seem, from an outsider's perspective, that is a system in crisis if the private sector is building so many of these new facilities.
Well, certainly retirement villages are still being built, and some of the aged care facilities that you may see coming on stream at the moment were probably planned 5 years ago when there was still a bit of money in the system. However, the reality is that the retirement village operators, who have been the largest contributor of aged care beds to the country's stock over the last 20 years probably, have pulled right back on the construction of aged care facilities because there's just no money in it. Some of them have stopped completely. Others are building enough aged care beds for their retirement villages so that their own residents have got somewhere to go if they need care, but they're not meeting the demand of the wider population. They're just meeting the demand of their own continuum of care.
There seem to be three types of people, and most people who are listening to this will have parents or grandparents or even themselves in this situation. So when you get to retirement and you're looking to downscale and you can't look after yourself and all that sort of stuff, you can either apply and get some home help, and that would seem to be the first intent of the government because it's the cheaper option. You can end up in a retirement villages, selling your house and purchasing a unit in one of those retirement villages, and losing money, in essence, in paying yearly subscriptions to be in that particular village. Or the third option is you end up in a rest home. You've gone past both of those and you are now being cared for by others on a daily basis. Are there any other options you've got when you're old? That's it, isn't it?
Pretty much. You've covered the three options. And the two of those that you mentioned, so the home help support that people get and residential care, are all driven by government's needs assessment. So we've got needs assessment teams around the country that are assessing elderly residents and determining what level of care they qualify for. And you're right, it is means tested. So some people will qualify for a subsidy. Others, if they have the financial means to pay for themselves, will be expected to cover their own costs, particularly in residential care. Retirement villages typically are independent living, so they are people who have made a choice to go into an alternative home. They've maybe downsized from their family home, and they're going into an environment where they're surrounded by people of a similar age with similar interests. And many retirement villages do offer the continuum of care, as I mentioned, to be able to move into aged care if they need it.
But talking about rest homes in particular, so once you get to that position where you can't look after yourself and you need somebody to look after you, the government's option is and it does encourage people to stay in their own home, even if their home might be 3 bedrooms and big and 2 bathrooms and everything else, and there's just, mum or dad rattling around in it. I'm assuming that's a deliberate policy because it's cheaper than, in actual fact, getting you into a residential home environment.
Absolutely, and in that information I sent through to you, there was some research that has been done by the Aged Care Association over the last several years where we've looked at people's health status when they've been involved with home care type support and then when they moved into residential care. And there's a significant lift in the overall quality of health for people in residential care because they're getting 24/7 care as opposed to a few hours a week. But probably more importantly than anything, they're actually getting socialisation. There's a huge issue with people in home support environments where they are on their own for many, many hours every day.
Yeah, and they get lonely.
They get lonely, and there's been some research done internationally that would suggest that severe isolation on the elderly has the same impact on their health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
And they get mentally depressed as well, some of them too. So you're exacerbating the issue. Yes, no, and indeed, but the interesting thing is, and I often say this, thank God for Filipinos, because we wouldn't have XXX in this country. We probably wouldn't have dairy farms, we wouldn't have nurses in our hospitals, but we also wouldn't have a lot of rest home people. It's a poorly paid job, isn't it, to be a home helper? It's minimum wage stuff.
Home help or residential care?
Well, home help to start with, but residential care as well. Let's talk about that a little bit later on. But let's talk about home help first of all. It's a group of people who don't get paid an awful lot of money, who have to use their own cars in many cases to drive around to their clients and spend an hour or two a week with their particular client. It isn't a very attractive occupation.
Oh, I think like a lot of health services around the country, home health is struggling for staff just like the rest of us are.
Okay, and when you say the rest of us, you can look from the vantage of both a retirement village, which you're in charge at Chatford, or a residential home, which is at Birchley. Is it difficult getting staff for your residential home as well?
Yes. Yep.
And why is that? Because you're not paying enough money?
That's part of the challenge. And since COVID, I think there has been some issues around the perception of aged care as an environment to work, and I think people perceived it through COVID as being a risky environment because internationally there was huge numbers of deaths occurring in aged residential care facilities. We actually in New Zealand were much better than almost every other country in the world in terms of our care of the elderly and aged care. But it did create a bit of a stigma around rest homes for a while. I think we're getting through that, and we're certainly starting to see some more interest in staff working in aged care, but it's still a challenge. There's still a shortage of staff.
Are we a selfish group? I mean, as a society, the West, white people, as a general rule, do you think? In the sense, Malcolm, that we actually expect our elderly parents to go and live in one of these facilities rather than look after them ourselves?
Yeah, well, as I said in that piece that I sent through to you, the multi-generational household has been disappearing from New Zealand for a long time now. Not so much in every ethnicity, but certainly in the Pākehā environment. We're not seeing the situation where our grandparents are being looked after by their children or their grandchildren. And that's sad, but it's the reality of what we are dealing with, and that's where the demand is coming from largely for aged care.
Okay, so looking ahead, I have read your piece. It's a very good. It's a long piece to an incoming government outlining the facts, the surveys, the international surveys that have been conducted, the problems that are facing your industry as a whole. But just run me forward if nothing changes. So run me forward, because I don't think anything will. I mean, I'm a bit of a pessimist. There's no money in the kitty. And the money that they've spent with COVID in particular has been wasted for no real outcome at the end of the day. We both know that, Malcolm. This government is going to have to cut its cloth. It's already spending more money. Well, this last government's going out spending billions more money than it's taking in revenue each year, so that can't continue. If there is going to be no further financial assistance for the aged care sort of sector, how do you perceive the next 5 to 10 years playing out?
Can I just pick up on your comment about COVID spending? Because this previous government was prepared to spend billions and billions of dollars to try and protect the health system from an unknown impact of COVID. That they invested hugely in making sure that the health system wasn't put under too much stress by COVID. We've known that the stress of the booming aged population was coming for 2 decades. We've known this was going to happen. but they haven't been prepared to invest the same amount of money to protect the health system from that impact. And to answer your question, there are 40,000 aged care beds in New Zealand at the moment. We are the moat that is protecting the public hospital system from an influx of elderly. At the moment, we are. But given the demand that's coming, 13 to 15,000 extra beds by 2030 will be required, and there's no encouragement for those beds to be built. There's only 11,000 public hospital beds in New Zealand, and we've got a growth of 13,000 to 15,000 aged care beds required. The impact on the public health system will be massive.